Our second reading today comes from Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. Listen now for the word of the Lord. When God began to create the heavens and the earth was complete chaos, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Friends, let there be light, right? Continuing on with our series, The Good Samaritan Bites the Dust, the book says this about let there be light. The opening 4 verses of the Bible are perhaps the most famous words in all world literature. As translated in the King James Version, they are also held up as one of the finest poetic accomplishments of all time. Let there be light is also familiar in Latin as fiat lux and has become one of the most quoted Bible passages of all time. Schools and colleges all over the world have appropriated this divine command as their motto, using it as a metaphor for learning. The sci-fi author Isaac Asimov puts the words into the mouth, so to speak, of a giant world creating supercomputer in his 1956 story, The Last Question. Enterprising web geeks have even translated the famous passage into something called lol speak, which I had to explain to Caleb Donahue back there, who told me he didn't start using the internet until 2017. Thank you for making us all feel old, Caleb. LolSpeak is an invented dialect that exists completely online. This dates back to my college days. And at start goes the bizarre version, has no light, and Ceiling Cat, also known as the god of the internet, says, I can has light, and light was. The late, great Alastair Cook, a veteran radio journalist on the BBC, had his own version, imagining the fiat lux as spoken by a U.S. government official. The Supreme Being mandated the illumination of the universe, and this directive was enforced forthwith. Now, our example today from our book is the family waited resignedly for the old joke as Grandpa flicked the switch behind the Christmas tree. Let there be light, he exclaimed theatrically. Now, of course, as shown by the image here, you can see that when I hear this phrase, I think of poor Clark Griswold from National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. Clark is, for those of you who have not seen this treasure, by the way, he is the classic American father trying to make the dream of the American Christmas come true. He has his entire family under one roof, not just the kids and the wife, but all of the in-laws, and even, to his surprise, the cat and a rather large dog. And he's got this beautiful tree in the living room. It's the largest one he could find out in the wilderness. He cut it down himself, brought it in, and it is beautiful. It is shining. Dinner is a giant turkey with all of what we hoped were the traditional side dishes. And his house, he spent the entire weekend decorating that house. He wants his home to be the brightest, most beautiful Christmas celebration, absolutely, totally obnoxious thing in the whole neighborhood. And he creates this display. Every single bulb has its place on the roof and on the siding of the house. Every square inch is to be lit up with magnificence. And finally, the moment comes, after all this preparation, to see his work completed. He brings out the whole family. Drum roll, he asks. They're getting ready. Clark Griswold is bringing up the plugs, and he goes, "Oh, let there be light." Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And the upset, well, something must be wrong, and the family starts to scatter, searching for what could be the answer. And then by chance, his wife goes into the cloakroom or the laundry room. It's a junk room, whatever it is, and she flips one switch, and he's outside, and suddenly the angels are singing, the lights are blaring, the neighbors have been blinded, and then we see the entire city just shut down. And his house is a beacon of light. And he is out there, "Honey, come outside, come outside." And of course, she flicks the switch back off. She had gotten what she needed. But what a powerful statement. Let there be light. It is the statement of creation, of authority. And you almost never hear the phrase said without absolute confidence. I mean, how many times do you hear someone say, "Let there be light"? No, it's always, "Let there be light." And in the creation story, God makes light, and later, God makes us in God's own image. Let there be humanity. Let there be creators like myself. John chapter 1 says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light. The life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overtake it." These words echo our reading from Genesis chapter 1, which details the events of the creation of the universe. God spoke all things into being, and it was good. God breathed life into nothing and made it alive, gave it purpose, gave it love, and made beauty from chaos. Now, we use light as a metaphor for all things that are beautiful. For example, the light has been used to talk about the Spirit, love, the Word, kindness, goodness, warmth, enlightenment. And all of these things are things that we find beautiful. God placed the light and the Word and the Spirit within us and called us good and called us beautiful. If God is the creator, the originator of all things, and God made everything like a reflection of God's self, then is God not the beauty? And are we not by reflection beautiful? Theologians and philosophers throughout time have said that if God is beauty, then creation surely is beautiful. Now, much like Plato's cave allegory, also known as the theory of forms, which states that what we see here, what's in front of us, is an imperfect reflection of the original, which is perfect. So for those of you who don't know Plato's cave allegory, imagine that there are people stuck in a cave their entire lives, and they see shadow puppets on a wall. And they are told that that is reality. But one of them turns around and sees the one casting the shadow puppets and goes outside of the cave and finds the perfect. So the shadow puppets on the wall are the hands which form them. They're really the hands that form them, as we are to the Creator himself. So too, the beautiful is a reflection of the beauty which is God. Now, this is God in us and in all things, the Creator and the created. All of it is beautiful, but not many Presbyterians use the word beauty for God. We don't use that word often, and perhaps it goes back through our denominational history with our dislike for images and icons. If you look around, even in this sanctuary, compared to a Catholic sanctuary, or especially a Greek or Russian Orthodox sanctuary, we are rather bare, aren't we? And that goes all the way back to the Reformation, where John Knox would go into the Catholic churches and rip out all of the art and burn it, because people were worshiping the art instead of God. At least that's what he said. So, we don't use beauty when we talk about God. And I think that because of that movement, I think that movement was a mistake. We have missed out on so much beauty. People create as an honor to God. Now, beauty is all around us because beauty is God. One of the things I keep hearing here at Round Rock is, y'all love the view right beyond these windows. Who made that? God. None of us could possibly recreate something so magnificent. Now, the light of God, it is beautiful. It is shining through those windows right now. It is shining here in all things and throughout all of you. Norman MacLean, in his book, A River Runs Through It, which many of you may also have read or seen the film adaptation from 1992. As I was telling Caleb earlier, that was back when Brad Pitt was very nice. So if you are a Presbyterian and you have not read or seen that, that is your homework this week. But in that book, A River Runs Through It, Norman MacLean introduces us to his father in the first few pages. His father is a Presbyterian minister and a fly fisherman. He says, "As a Scot and a Presbyterian, my father believed that man by nature was a mess and had fallen from an original state of grace. Somehow, I early developed the notion that he had done this by falling from a tree. As for my father, I never knew whether he believed God was a mathematician, but he certainly believed God could count, and that only by picking up God's rhythms were we able to regain power and beauty. Unlike many Presbyterians, he often used the word beautiful." Norman wrote A River Runs Through It as an attempt to understand the sudden and tragic death of his younger brother, Paul. The two grew up learning to fish in the gorgeous rivers of Montana with their father after he preached the Sunday morning sermons. And by the way, fun side note, if you have seen the film, the place where they filmed that river is now a Presbyterian campsite. The fishing was just as important as their theological education. His father took it very seriously. Through play, they learned of God's love, creation, and grace through experience. Norman's father once picked up a smooth river stone, and he held it in front of his children, and he said, "Long ago, rain fell on mud and became rock. 500 million years ago, but even before that, beneath the rocks are the words of God." The river became a place where Norman felt God's presence, constant and strong as the flow of the waters cutting into the sun-kissed canyons of home. In this way, Norman was much like his father. Paul, the younger brother, he had his own sets of rules that he seemed to live by. He broke away from the tried and true fly fishing methods of his father and made his own rhythm for casting the fly. He was, like in all senses of life it seemed, even changing his name in young adulthood, Paul was different. The rules of life just didn't seem to apply to Paul. Norman, on the other hand, was very much like his father. He was scholarly, he was predictable, and the other kids on the block even nicknamed him Preacher, though he did not serve within the church. And any of you who have been a preacher's kid probably know of this curse. Now, the two boys were as different as could be, but they always found peace and unity there at the river, and it always seemed to draw them back time and time again. And as Norman grew into a teenager, he looked upon his brother as he cast his fly in that new way, and he saw an artist. As teenagers do, they work to find their own way in the world, and this is what makes them unique. What limits are there to be tested? It's also what makes teenagers so frustrating, right? But Paul, he was creating a new work of art in the way that he cast and caught, and it was all his own invention. It was the one place where Paul was happiest, despite everything else in his life. Years later into adulthood, Norman sat watching his younger brother cast again in that same river at the same spot. And he found that Paul wasn't the artist. He was the art. This was shortly before Paul's untimely death. And maybe Norman only realized it thereafter, maybe even as he was writing this book, that God was the artist and by grace gave Paul the thrill of that one last river trout. And in that moment, Paul was beautiful. He was at one with God. He was at one with his calling. He was made whole, if even for a single moment. In his final lines, Norman has not made sense of Paul's nature or his demise, but he says, each one of us here today will at one time in our lives look upon a loved one who is in need and ask the same question. We are willing to help, Lord. But what, if anything, is needed? For it is true that we can seldom help those that are closest to us. Either we don't know what part of ourselves to give to them, or more often than not, the part that we have to give is not the part that is wanted or needed. And so it is those that we live with and should know who elude us the most. But we can still love them. We can still love them completely, but without completely understanding. Now, earlier I said that God is beauty, and his creation is the beautiful. And beauty is not always orderly. Beauty can be chaos. It can be fire and wind and rain and brilliant sunshine. Beauty is love run wild that flows over the edges of infinity. For Norman MacLean, God's word was the foundation that we stand upon, and the river, that river is love. And the fish in Paul's hands, that is grace. And in Paul, he witnessed the beauty of God reflected, the beautiful. Now, life does not always make sense, and nor should it, frankly. We are always trying to make sense of life, but I'm sorry. Not everything makes sense. Not everything needs to make sense. That's part of the mystery. To live in a totally sensible world is to live in a world limited by our understanding, which is so small in the face of all that is. And sometimes the best that we can do is reflect, wonder, and to simply point at the beauty within the beautiful. We can point at it and we can marvel, point to it and seek to understand something new. The John text tells of John the Baptist, that there was a man sent from God whose name was John, and he came to witness, to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light, the true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. Friends, when God created the world, God proclaimed, "Let there be light," and it was so. And in that same confidence, God said, "Let there be one of you, and may the light of the Spirit dwell within you and shine out through you. For I am the beauty, and you are the beautiful. Now, why would we ever dare to see God's creation and God's confidence in God's creation as anything less than beautiful? When God created light, it was with confidence. When God created you, it was with confidence. God knew exactly what he was doing. And like Paul, and a river runs through it, we may not lead the prettiest of lives, but we are beautiful. Each of us in our callings, our light shines brightest, called to love the creation that God has given us. As reflections of God's beauty and light, we are each like a bulb in a string of Christmas lights, and if one of us goes out, every single one of us suffers for it. So do not let your light be hidden because you believe that you are not pretty to other people. You do not shine for other people. You shine for the glory of God, your Creator, who stands there in the snow with the plugs in his hands, singing with pomp and circumstance at the birthing of the existence of you. And he checked every little light bulb in his creation, and he placed it just where it would be, so that it would shine beautifully just where it is. You were made who you are, to shine as God would take joy at your shining. You were created for the sake of God's joy. So light up. It makes God smile. Your life, the ways that you give kindness and love and grace to others, that is beautiful. The things that make you quirky, the things that make you unique, that is beautiful. Your story, your scars, your bumps, your wrinkles, your warts, every little misplaced hair, each of these things were put there to help make you shine just the way that God wants you to shine for him. So do not hide your light under a bushel. Don't let Satan blow it out. Don't let other people or the pressures of society or life circumstance ever blow it out. You little tiny light of God, let there be light. Let there be light. And let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. So friends, I know you want to get up. Let's all stand up. And let's sing together with all the confidence of God the Creator, who first proclaimed, "Let there be light." And let's sing, "Let it shine." Amen.